South Sudan, and indeed the whole Sudan, has lost its beloved son, Dr. John Garang de Mabior.
This is Pillars of History 12, where truth breaks chains and history speaks power. I'm your host, Ice Frank, and here we uncover the untold stories, challenge propaganda, and give voice to the giants of our past and present. If you came for truth, you're in the right place. Let's rise.
They fought, they bled, and many were betrayed by the very nations they sought to build. Their names echo through the halls of African history, not just as presidents or revolutionaries, but as symbols of resistance. This is the story of 10 African leaders who stood against neocolonialism and colonialism and paid the ultimate price. From number 10 to number 1. This is the countdown history tried to bury, but Africa still remembers. Number 10. Sylvanus Olympio. The man who led Togo to independence was with a vision of African self-reliance. He refused to be a puppet. He rejected post-colonial military integration with France and sought economic independence, even printing a national currency to free his country from the CFA franc. But in the early hours of January 13th, 1963, Olympio was gunned down outside the American embassy in Rome. His killers were former French-trained soldiers, men who felt betrayed after being denied entry into Togo's army. Many believe France turned a blind eye or even encouraged the fraud. Olympio's crime, daring to walk a path Number 9. John Garang. He was a commander, a visionary, and for many, the father of South Sudan. Garang spent decades fighting for justice and equality in a divided Sudan, not for separation at first, but for unity under a fair system. He believed that Sudanese marginalized regions, South, East, and West deserved a voice. In 2005, he signed the Comprehensive Peace Agreement with the North, ending one of Africa's longest civil wars. He became the Vice President of Sudan and was poised to lead South Sudan into a new era. Then suddenly, he died in a helicopter crash just 3 weeks later. Officially, it was an accident, but many in Sudan and beyond still whisper of sabotage, of forces who feared that what Garang might become was very incredible.
Then the visual with the Kanyagir, the traditional African religion, when some people talk about an Islamic majority, this is a very dangerous language, because nobody should be anybody's majority and nobody should be anybody's minority. Article 1 of the NIF Constitution of the Sudan, the 1998 Constitution of the Sudan, Article 1, the beginning of the Constitution, talks about Muslims being the majority of the population of the Sudan. It is a fact. But why put it in Article 1 of it? Why put it in the Constitution at all? Because it is elective. You could also talk about indigenous African majority as a dangerous concept. You could also talk about a women's majority, because women are the majority. So, Mr. NIF, if you want us to talk about majorities, we will talk about it. We'll talk about the women's majority, and I would ask the women to go in the streets and demonstrate to take over so that the majority rules. If the dictatorship of the majority, that is what.
Number 8. Kwame Nkrumah, the first leader of independent Ghana. Nkrumah declared that Ghana's freedom was meaningless unless it led to the liberation of the entire African continent. He built schools, industries, and launched grand pan-African projects. He dreamed of a United States of Africa, an economic and political bloc to rival the West. But his boldness came at a price. In 1966, while he was on a peace mission to Vietnam, his government was overthrown in a coup. It was later revealed that the CIA had been watching him closely, and the Western powers saw him as a threat to their influence. Nkrumah never returned to power. He died in exile, broken in health, but not in spirit. Today he is remembered as the torchbearer of African unity. Number 7. Samora Machel. Samora Machel was a freedom fighter who led Mozambique to independence from Portuguese rule. He became the country's first president and was deeply committed to African liberation. He supported South Africa's ANC during the apartheid and refused to bow to foreign pressure. But on October 19th, 1986, while returning from a regional summit, his plane crashed in the mountains near the South African border. There were signs of foul play. The flight path had been diverted. A Soviet-made plane suddenly malfunctioned in a region dominated by South African radar. To this day, many suspect apartheid-era operatives played a role in the crash. Samora Machel was a threat to colonial remnants, and threats don't live long.
Luta continua! A luta continua! Contra o quê?
Against what? Against what must the struggle continue?
Contra o tribalismo.
Against tribalism.
A luta continua contra a ignorância,
Against ignorance.
contra o analfabetismo,
Against illiteracy.
contra a exploração do homem pelo homem,
Against exploitation.
contra a superstição,
Against superstition.
contra a miséria,
Against misery.
contra a fome,
Against
contra
hunger.
o pé descalço.
Against lack of clothing.
A luta continua
The struggle continues
para que sejamos todos homens iguais.
so that someday we will all be equal.
Que luta de boxe, não? É? A esquerda sempre prepara condições, não é verdade? Mas a direita para ser demolidor. Entende? É? A direita conservada como demolidor. E é assim que nós infiltramos as nossas forças, atravessar o Zambézio, abrir a frente de Manica e Sofala, Manica e Sofala e operar a retaguarda do inimigo, para não ter a logística. Era preciso destruir a logística do inimigo, a retaguarda do inimigo.
Number 6. Eduardo Mondlane, the intellectual architect of Mozambique's independence movement. A professor turned guerrilla, Mondlane led Frelimo, uniting diverse ethnic groups to fight the Portuguese. But he was not just a military mind. He was a strategist, a philosopher, a builder of nations. His charisma and clarity of purpose drew global attention, and that made him dangerous. In 1969, he received a parcel in Dar es Salaam. Inside was a bomb, wired to explode. He opened it, and just like that, the voice of a revolution was silenced. His death did not end the struggle, but it reminded the world how far colonial interests would go to stop African independence. Number 5. Steve Biko, a philosopher of freedom in apartheid South Africa. He wasn't a soldier, he was more dangerous than that. He told people to think through the Black consciousness movement. Biko told Black South Africans that their minds had been colonized, that liberation began within. He said, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. In 1977, at just 30 years old, Biko was arrested by the apartheid police. They beat him savagely, left him naked, handcuffed, bleeding until he died. But the beating could not still kill the idea. Biko became a martyr, and his message still echoes through South Africa.
We see a completely non-racial society. We don't believe, for instance, in the so-called guarantees for minority rights, because guaranteeing minority rights implies the recognition of portions of the community on a race basis. We believe that in our country there shall be no minority, there shall be no majority, there shall just be people. And those people will have the same status before the law, and they will have the same political rights before the law. So in a sense, it will be a completely non-racial egalitarian society.
But will the vast number of blacks, after all their experiences, be able to live a life without giving vent to feelings of revenge, of
yes, we believe it is the duty of the vanguard political movement which brings about change to educate people's outlooks. I mean, in the same way that blacks have never lived in a socialist economic system, they're going to learn to live in one. In the same way that they've always lived in a racially divided society, they're going to learn to live in a non-racial society. They've got many things to learn, and all this must be brought to them and explained to the people by the vanguard movement, which is leading the revolution.
No, our movement seeks to avoid violence.
But your own words call for direct confrontation.
That's right. We demand confrontation.
Isn't that a demand for violence?
Well, you and I are now in confrontation, but I see no violence.
Number 4. Amílcar Cabral. Amílcar Cabral was a poet, a thinker, a guerrilla leader. He led the fight against Portuguese rule in Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. He believed in education before revolution, ethics before power. Cabral trained his people not just to shoot, but to understand why they were fighting. He said, "We are not fighting to kill, we are fighting to restore life." But that life was cut short. On January 20th, 1973, just months before Guinea-Bissau declared independence, Cabral was assassinated, shot by men within his own movement. It was an inside job, possibly manipulated by the Portuguese intelligence. A light extinguished just before the dawn. Number 3. Muammar Gaddafi. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, a controversial figure but fearless one. He seized power in 1969 and ruled Libya for 40 years. He nationalized oil, invested in African infrastructure, and called for one African government, one military, one currency. His vision terrified the West. He funded liberation movements and defied NATO. But in 2011, his own uprising, backed by foreign bombs, overwhelmed him. Captured on the roadside, he was beaten, humiliated, and killed. The world watches as Libya collapsed into chaos. Was he a tyrant or a warning? History has yet to decide, but one thing is certain: Gaddafi defied empire.
Restoration at all in the streets. No one against us. Against me for what? Because I am not president.
But
they love me, all my people with me. They love me all.
But if they do love you,
they will die to protect me, my people.
If you say they do love you, then why are they capturing Benghazi and they say they're against you there? Why are they in Zawiya?
It is Qaeda, not my people. It is Qaeda. Qaeda, yes.
Colonel Gaddafi, the President of the United States, the leaders of Britain and other leaders are calling on you to step down, to leave Libya, to leave your position of power. Will you do that?
Who would leave his homeland? Why do I leave my homeland? Why do I leave Libya?
A year ago, Gaddafi was one of the world's longest-serving dictators, a murderer with American blood on his hands. Today, he is gone. And in Syria, I have no doubt that the Assad regime will soon discover that the forces of change cannot be reversed and that human dignity cannot be denied. How this incredible transformation will end remains uncertain. But we have a huge stake in the outcome. And while it's ultimately up to the people of the region to decide their fate, we will advocate for those values that have served our own country so well. We will stand against violence and intimidation. We will stand for the rights and dignity of all human beings, men and women, Christians, Muslims, and Jews. We will support policies that lead to strong and stable democracies and open markets, because tyranny is no match for liberty. And we will safeguard America's own security against those who threaten our citizens, our friends, and our interests.
Number 2. Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was called Africa's Che Guevara, but he was more than that. Sankara came to power in 1983 and transformed Upper Volta into Burkina Faso, the land of black people. He rejected foreign aid, nationalized land, planted trees, vaccinated millions, and made women's rights a national priority. He sold off government luxury cars and rode a bicycle to work. But not everyone wanted a self-reliant Africa. On October 15, 1987, Sankara was assassinated in a coup led by his best friend, Blaise Compaoré. It was widely believed the coup was supported by France and its regional allies. They buried him in an unmarked grave, but they could not bury his vision. Now, Ibrahim Traoré rose as his reincarnation.
Burkina Faso is a name drawn from the land itself, which has meaning in our language, which means land of honest men.
Why did you want to change the name of Upper Volta?
Yes, because Upper Volta, it meant nothing to anyone, especially to us Burkinabe. It's a name that only reminds us of a colonial past. On the other hand,
live differently.
Number 1. Patrice Lumumba, the first Prime Minister of Democratic Republic of Congo. He spoke with fire, courage, and clarity. He refused to let Belgium retain power after independence. He nationalized resources and declared that Congo's destiny would no longer be retained in Europe. But the world wasn't ready. Within months, he was overthrown, tortured, and executed in a secret operation involving Belgian officers and CIA operatives. His body was dissolved in acid, his teeth kept as trophies. For decades, Congo was ruled by a puppet dictatorship. But Lumumba's spirit never died. His words live in struggle for true independence across Africa. These 10 names are more than stories. They are warnings. They are flames that light the path toward justice, sovereignty, and dignity. Each stood against empire. Each dared to dream, and each paid a price so that we today could stand a little taller. Africa remembers, Africa rises.